What's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you? Now imagine doing that in front of thousands, maybe even millions of people around the world. Today, we're going to bring you 10 of the most embarrassing moments to ever hit the UFC. Number 10. Julian Lane. And what better way to kick things off than with this bona fide classic from an early season of The Ultimate Fighter. The problem with putting a bunch of highly trained egomaniacs in a house together for several weeks is that there's a high likelihood that things take a turn for the chaotic at least once. And in this season, a night of drinking left Julian Lane in a state that, well, you gotta see it to believe it. Some dudes want to make money, some want to make friends.
Did we just become best friends?
But Julian Lane, he wanted to throw hands there and then. And his tearful and drunken way of describing that fact made him one of MMA's earliest memes.
I don't want to do that, man. I do.
Julian Lane has since and will forever be known as the Let Me Bang guy. An absolutely hilarious moment. Number 9. Gray Maynard. Sometimes Joe Rogan is the single greatest post-fight interviewer the sport could ever hope for. And then on other nights, he can't help but do stuff like this. Gray Maynard had just seemingly beaten his former tough castmate Rob Emerson by slam TKO, or so he thought. But when it emerged that he too had been KO'd by the slam, the fight was declared as a no contest. Gray, who was clearly concussed and confused over what had happened, tried to plead with the ref, telling them that he was not, in fact, KO'd. Rogan, being Rogan, decided to walk the visibly unsteady Maynard through the replay step by step.
He tapped, but you were unconscious. You knocked yourself out in the takedown. Look at the replay. You're totally unconscious. Bro, look at the replay. You picked him up, watch the dump, bang. You hit your head down, now watch this. You're out. Watch this.
He's done right there.
He is done, but so are you. You're unconscious.
Making this embarrassing situation a painfully awkward one too. The self-KO was bad enough, but this aftermath was unbearable. Number 8. Justine Kish. There's a long list of things you hope don't happen to you in the cage. Eating a solid head kick, getting punched clean in the liver. But for Justine Kish, she managed to have every fighter's worst nightmare come true.
No! God, please, no!
When she, how do we put this, left it all on the octagon during her showdown with Felice Herrig. You can notice the brown stains on the cage floor. And yeah, not much else needs to be said about this one. To be fair to Justine, she owned it, putting out this hilarious tweet not long after the fight, and earning herself a score of fans around the world. If you haven't already, don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below with any topics you'd like for us to cover. Number 7. Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey's UFC career was a tale of incredible highs and totally embarrassing lows. And ahead of her fight with Holly Holm, Rousey was so confident that she basically outlined Holm's entire path to victory a few days before it happened.
Frustrated to a point I'll make a mistake and she can try and kick me in the head, but it's not gonna go like that.
Simply put, Ronda predicted her own demise on national television.
But it's not gonna go like that.
But that wasn't the worst part. No, the performance itself was a truly awful one. A showcase of Rousey's true limitations, and the way that Holm pieced her up from start to finish made the eventual head kick KO seem like a merciful end. Ronda had been thoroughly exposed, and the way she shut herself out from the media afterwards only made this loss worse. Number 6. Kalib Starnes. Timidity is a very real thing in MMA, a foul that referees are fully within their rights to penalize you for. This includes running away from your opponent.
Why are you running?
Refusing to engage or stand up from your guard position. But for Kalib Starnes, the final minute of his fight with Nate Quarry was coming after a very poor losing effort. And at that point, it just seemed like Starnes wanted nothing more to do with this bout. Quarry, in a last-ditch attempt to entertain the fans, decided to make these bizarre robotic gestures, chasing after Starnes, taunting him the whole time. As you might expect, Starnes was cut from the UFC shortly after, and to this day, this performance remains a benchmark for timidity in the octagon. Number 5. Picture the scene. You're being set up for your first UFC pay-per-view headliner, and your bosses at the UFC are giving you a real layup, a favorable matchup against an aging Nate Diaz that will likely propel you to superstardom. All Boers had to do was make weight, and he would be heavily favored to score a dominant win over Nate Diaz. However, despite the fact that it was all there for the taking, he missed weight by a shocking margin of 7 pounds. losing the Diaz fight, his main event slot, and ended up with a gimme fight against an unprepared Kevin Holland. This man lost a hell of a lot of fans that day, believe you me. Number 4. Luke Rockhold. Confidence is an important thing in the cage. And for Luke Rockhold, his aura was really bringing him great success as he rose up and eventually won UFC gold. And after beating a fighter like Chris Weidman, Rockhold was obviously extremely confident in his ability to beat a short notice Michael Bisping at UFC 199.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll separate myself in the back. I'll
Listen,
show
bro,
you
everybody
and the
here
world
knows
that I'm that
you
much
won
better
the
than
first
you
fight.
and Anderson.
Everybody.
After all, he had already dominated and submitted Mike in their first fight. And so Rockhold was pretty much on a victory lap before the fight had even started. But man, this guy was about to have his entire world shaken to its core. A first round left hand from Bisping rocked the champion badly. And before anyone could pick their jaws up off the floor, the count was TKOing the heavily favored Rockhold for the biggest upset we'd seen in years. And if that wasn't bad enough, all of that pre-fight confidence came back to bite Luke Rockhold so badly that it would take him nearly 6 years to rehabilitate his image and get the fans back on his side. Number 3. Andy Wang. Another hilarious tough moment comes in next with the infamous Andy Wang, a man who managed to somehow anger his coach BJ Penn so much that he basically kicked him off his team. And Wang's problems didn't end there. This guy just seemed to have a weird effect on everyone who came in contact with him. And when he finally did lose inside the cage, man, his post-fight reaction was not pretty. The tears came flooding out of Andy Wang for the whole world to see. The dude was sobbing so hard that Coach BJ even did a hilarious impression of his wailing. Not the greatest Ultimate Fighter contestant we've ever seen. Not by a long stretch. Number 2. Dennis Hallman. Back in the day, fighters had some say over what they wore in the octagon, and Dennis Hallman had easily one of the weirdest fight night attire we've seen in the UFC. Claiming to have lost a bet, Hallman competed at UFC 133 in nothing more than a pair of blue Speedos. As you can imagine, these weren't exactly designed for competing in mixed martial arts. Viewers at home were left shocked when Hallman predictably suffered a wardrobe malfunction. Yes, this man had his crown jewels displayed to thousands of fight fans watching around the world. Dana White was of course not too happy about this whole ordeal.
I'd call it disgusting. That was disgusting.
Going on to ban Speedos from being worn at future UFC events.
It was not good. It will never happen again. I can guarantee you that.
Number 1. Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva is without a doubt one of the greatest fighters to have ever lived. His reign over the middleweight division was legendary. After 16 consecutive wins, 10 of which were title defenses, Silva thought himself untouchable. But he was soon proven wrong in his 2013 matchup against Chris Weidman, where Silva's showboating style finally caught up with him. Mid-fight, Silva dropped his hands in an attempt to mock Weidman's strikes, even pretending to be rocked. But Weidman was unfazed and continued his assault, clipping Silva flush on the chin with the Brazilian's guard nowhere in sight. Weidman quickly closed out the fight, finishing Silva in the second round. When all was said and done, Silva's arrogance and cocky fighting style led to him losing his belt in one of the most embarrassing ways possible.